For thousands of years, deep beneath the sands of the dead world called Velfarn, there rested a structure older than most stars, untouched by time, buried in silence, and hiding a relic so powerful that even the mightiest alien civilizations feared to speak its name aloud. For in the center of that black pyramid, sealed within an unbreakable chamber of energy and steel, was a piece of living armor, shining like liquid metal, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat, and completely unwilling to accept any living being that came near. Many tried. The first were the Sarnak warlords, who brought armies and machines, believing they could force the armor to obey. But they were torn apart, their bones crushed and their bodies flung into space by invisible waves of rejection, while the armor remained still, almost asleep. Then came the scholars of the Xipheron dynasty, who whispered that the armor was waiting for a specific DNA pattern, some lost species from ancient records. So they cloned hundreds of genetic copies from every known race. But the armor remained cold, silent, and lifeless. Over time, the legend grew, of an armor that chose its wearer, and of a prophecy carved in forgotten languages that said, "The true flame shall wear the shell of silence. The one who should not be, shall be." Most called it myth. Others called it madness. But no one dared try again, not after the last attempt ended with a supernova-level explosion that erased half a moon. So the armor was left alone, guarded, feared, and slowly forgotten. Until a human came. He wasn't special. At least, that's what everyone thought. He wasn't a general, not a famous pilot, not a scientist, not even trained in alien diplomacy. He was just an explorer named Jackson Riley, part of a deep space salvage crew, searching the galaxy for old tech to sell back on Earth or to trade with minor colonies. But fate, or something stranger, guided his ship straight into the dead zone of Velfarn. His ship was damaged, systems offline, fuel low. So he landed. He saw the pyramid. Curiosity took over, and he walked in. No sensors warned him. No guards stopped him. No alarms sounded, because no one expected a human to come near this place, let alone survive entry. Jackson moved carefully, flashlight in hand, steps echoing on metallic floors, eyes wide at walls covered with glowing symbols and ancient murals showing strange figures in armor, standing against monstrous shapes that looked like shadows with claws and empty mouths. He didn't understand the meaning. He didn't care. He just saw tech. And then, in the center of the great chamber, raised on a black pedestal, floating above a pool of shifting light, was the armor. It looked like a second skin. It shimmered between silver and dark chrome, almost as if it breathed. Something in him froze. Not fear, not excitement. Something else. A whisper, maybe. Not in his ears, but in his bones. He stepped forward. One more step, and the armor moved. A tendril of living metal reached out slowly, like a curious creature, not attacking, not warning, just reaching. Jackson blinked, raised his hand, touched it, and everything changed. There was no scream, no explosion, no burning. Instead, the armor melted over his skin like warm water, wrapping around him in smooth layers, covering him from boots to chest, then forming a helmet that snapped shut like a seal. Jackson gasped, but he wasn't in pain. In fact, he could breathe better. He could see better. He felt faster, stronger, and clearer. It was like his mind expanded. He could feel the armor thinking, watching, listening. Then, one word echoed in his head, not in English, but he understood it somehow. Accepted. Far across the galaxy, dozens of hidden sensors activated. Alerts flared across old satellites left orbiting Velfarn. And in a dark corner of the Galactic Senate, where the leaders of thousands of alien species sat in endless meetings and arguments, a red light blinked, a light that hadn't blinked in 6,000 years. The alarm was clear. The armor has chosen. Panic spread. Emergency sessions were called. Questions fired. Who is the wearer? What species? Is it possible? When the answer came, human, silence filled the chamber. Then laughter. Then arguments. Some called it a hoax. Others called it a threat. But one cold, ancient being, the Tulrath Prime, rose and said in a voice that made even the war-hardened shiver, "If the armor has truly chosen a human, then the great silence is coming again. And this time, we are not ready." Back on Velfarn, Jackson stood alone, heart pounding, armor gleaming, unsure what had just happened, but feeling as if the whole universe had suddenly shifted focus toward him. And far beyond the stars, something ancient opened its eyes. And it was hungry. The moment Jackson Riley stepped out of the dark pyramid, the sky above Velfarn seemed different, as if the stars themselves were watching him. And even though the air was still and the ruins silent, there was a strange pressure in the atmosphere now, something invisible yet heavy, like the entire world had awakened from a deep sleep just to observe what he would do next. And the armor on his body, which had wrapped itself so smoothly and naturally, felt more alive with every step he took, pulsing gently like a second heart beneath the metal. He tried to speak to his ship through his communicator, but before his voice could reach the mic, a new voice echoed directly inside his mind. Not his own, not human, but calm, deep, and patient, telling him that outside communications were now blocked, not by malfunction or accident, but by protection, because the armor had taken control of everything around him, not out of fear, but out of instinct, to keep him safe, to shield him from what was coming. Jackson, unsure of what to do, climbed back toward his ship slowly, each footstep feeling more powerful than the last, and though his mind told him to panic, to scream, to take the armor off, something deep inside whispered that he should not, that the armor was not trapping him, but choosing him, helping him become something else, something more. And that idea, strange as it was, gave him both fear and confidence at the same time. While he moved, far away in the galactic core, a council of alien minds, some physical, some digital, and some that existed as clouds of energy, watched the red signal blinking on an ancient display, and when the words confirmed again that the armor had been claimed by a human, many of them refused to believe it, saying it was a trick, an error in the system, or a lie created by humanity to gain respect. But deep down, even those who mocked the signal knew the truth, for there was only one armor of its kind in the galaxy, and it had never accepted anyone, not in over 50,000 years. One member of the council, a tall, insect-like creature named Falcor, slammed his clawed hand on the table, demanding an immediate response, shouting that if the armor had chosen a human, then war was not just coming. It was already here, because the armor did not serve peace, it did not protect nations, it served only one purpose, to awaken the last defense of the Ancient Ones, and if it had awakened now, it meant something worse than war was already on its way. Back on Velifarn, Jackson's ship opened automatically as he approached, systems turning on with a smooth hum, and though he expected things to be normal, he quickly realized that every screen, every console, even the navigation controls were now showing strange data, unfamiliar symbols glowing across the interface, and somehow, even though he'd never seen the language before, he understood it perfectly, as if the armor was translating everything directly into his brain, giving him access to knowledge he had no reason to possess. The armor told him, in its strange yet calm mental voice, that time was short. It explained, piece by piece, that it had been built long ago, not by any species that still lived, but by beings who had faced something from beyond the edge of the known universe, something cold, silent, and unstoppable, a force that did not conquer planets but erased them completely, not for power, but simply to clear the space where life existed, and that force, once sealed outside the galactic barrier, was now beginning to stir again. The armor was not just a weapon. It was a key, a signal, a beacon. And now, because a human had worn it, the galaxy would know that the final cycle had begun. Jackson didn't fully understand what it meant, but the moment he looked out the window of his ship and saw 3 alien cruisers breaking through orbit, ships that were not there before, he knew that someone, somewhere, had seen what happened, and they were already coming for him. And not to talk, not to reason, but to kill, or worse, to capture him before he could learn the armor's full power. His ship shook. Warning lights flashed. The armor reacted instantly, linking with the ship's weapons, enhancing its shields, even overriding the controls to engage a strange new engine drive he had never seen before. An engine that, when it activated, tore the ship into hyperspace with a scream of power so sharp it cracked the mountain beneath him. And in that flash, Jackson Riley disappeared from Velifarn. But the galaxy had seen. The signal had spread. The knowledge that a human had bonded with the armor of ages was no longer a secret. It was a fear, a whisper, a prophecy returning to life, and across 1,000 systems, old enemies began to gather again. Strange alliances formed in shadows, forgotten weapons were unearthed from old moons, and everywhere, the name of the armor returned to the minds of leaders, generals, and monsters. Some wanted to destroy the human. Others wanted to use him, but all agreed on one thing. If the armor had chosen, then nothing would be the same again. And deep in the blackness between galaxies, something moved. It felt the armor awaken. It remembered the war. And it was coming back. The ship floated through the quiet of deep space, far away from any star or planet, surrounded by darkness so complete that even the sensors had nothing to report. But inside the ship, Jackson Riley sat in the pilot's seat, staring at the glowing panels around him, his thoughts spinning like a storm because even though he had escaped from the alien warships on Velafarn, he knew in his heart that this was not over, not even close, and the armor, now wrapped tightly around his body like it had been made just for him, was not letting him forget that something far greater had just begun. He hadn't slept since he left the planet, not because he didn't want to, but because the armor wouldn't let him, feeding his mind with images of ancient battles, showing him flashes of creatures so massive they could block out the sun, and fleets so large they made galaxies look small, and while he couldn't understand where the visions were coming from, or whether they were memories or warnings, he could feel the fear behind each one, a deep fear buried inside the armor itself. Like even this powerful thing remembered pain and defeat. Suddenly, the ship's lights dimmed, the engines slowed, and the stars outside shifted as the ship exited hyperspace, not at a location Jackson had chosen, but one the armor had selected, and when he looked through the main viewport, he saw something unexpected. A world floating alone in space, surrounded by debris, pieces of ships, old satellites, weapons, and even broken space stations, all frozen in a silent orbit, circling the planet like a graveyard, untouched and forgotten. The armor told him, in that strange voice that echoed only in his thoughts, that this place was called Trinaxis, once a mighty stronghold for the Ancient Ones, the ones who had created the armor long before humans had even walked the earth, and now it was nothing but a tomb, a memory of what had been lost. But also, hidden deep inside, was something important, something he needed to understand if he wanted to survive what was coming. As the ship landed, Jackson stepped out onto the broken surface, his armored boots crunching over shattered metal and dust, and even though the sky above was black and the planet felt dead, the ground still hummed faintly beneath him, like it remembered life, and with every step he took, the armor seemed to guide him, not just physically, but mentally, leading him down a cracked path toward the heart of the ruin. The deeper he went, the more the silence pressed against him. And soon, he reached what looked like a giant underground temple, built from dark stone and ancient metal, covered in symbols that pulsed with soft blue light the moment he approached, and as the doors opened without a sound, he knew that this place had been waiting, not for anyone, but for him. And that truth sent a chill down his spine, even though the armor kept his body warm and protected. Inside the temple, he found a chamber filled with ancient machines, tall statues of beings that looked nothing like humans or modern aliens, and in the center, a tall pedestal with a round glowing orb floating above it, spinning slowly, sending out waves of information so fast and strange that even Jackson's mind couldn't process them, until the armor stepped in and slowed the data down, letting him see the truth, one piece at a time. He learned that the armor was one of only 7 ever made, each bonded to a single warrior of the Ancient Ones, and when those warriors fell in the final war, their armors were hidden across the galaxy, sealed with codes and traps, so that none would ever be worn again, unless the galaxy faced the same enemy once more. And now, because the seal had been broken, it meant that enemy had returned, and Jackson, a human no one expected, had become the first new warrior in a war that had not been spoken of for 100,000 years. He also learned that he was not alone. Others had been watching. Across the galaxy, secret groups had existed since the fall of the Ancient Ones, each sworn to make sure the armor stayed hidden. And now that he had activated one, they would come for him, not to help, but to destroy him before the power inside him could grow too strong. And as the orb showed him faces, ships, and locations, he realized that some of these enemies were already nearby, hunting, closing in, and some of them were not strangers. They were leaders of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, wearing friendly faces but hiding old fears. Just then, alarms rang through his suit. The temple shook. Outside, ships had arrived, sleek black cruisers with no markings, moving silently through the ruins, scanning for life, ready to strike without warning, and Jackson, no longer surprised, turned and walked back toward the surface, his pace calm, the armor now glowing faintly with lines of golden energy, and for the first time, he felt the armor speak not just with words, but with feeling, giving him confidence, courage, and something more, purpose. He was no longer just a man. He was the armor's chosen. And as he stepped out into the broken light, the enemy ships opened fire without warning. But the beams stopped before they could hit, blocked by an invisible shield the armor had generated, and in one smooth motion, Jackson raised his hand, and the ground beneath the ships cracked, metal lifted, and with a force that should not have been possible, he crushed one of the ships into the dirt with a wave of his arm. The others turned to flee. Too late. The armor moved like lightning, launching him into the sky, and with a burst of golden energy, he struck again, fast, clean, silent, and when the smoke cleared, there was no enemy left in the sky, only broken parts falling like rain across the ruined planet. As Jackson floated above the ruins, catching his breath, he heard the voice in his mind one more time. The first battle is won, but many eyes now turn to you. And far, far away, on a planet hidden behind clouds of fire, something very old opened its eyes for the first time in ages, and it remembered the armor, and it remembered war. The real war hadn't started yet, but the galaxy was already shaking. The silence that followed Jackson's last strike was deafening. The stars above seemed to watch as he hovered above the wreckage, his heart racing but his mind still calm, the armor's presence inside him like a steady pulse, guiding his thoughts. Even though he had defeated the alien ships with ease, a gnawing feeling of unease lingered. The victory had been too quick, too simple. Something was missing. Something far larger than the alien cruisers he had just destroyed. The ship's systems chimed, drawing Jackson's attention. A new signal blinked on the screen, far beyond anything the armor had revealed so far. It wasn't just a standard distress beacon or a random transmission. It was something more ancient. The symbols were clear now, appearing as if they had been waiting for him to understand. He recognized them. An old language, one the armor had shown him in fragments, but this was a message from deep within the galactic archives. It spoke of an enemy, not just one of the empires, but something even older, something far worse. He began to decipher the message, the armor feeding him the information piece by piece. The enemy wasn't just an alien race, it was an ancient force that had once tried to destroy the entire galaxy. They had been sealed away long ago by the ancients, the creators of the armor. But their seal had begun to break, and they were coming back, and Jackson had unknowingly activated the armor at a time when the seal was weakest. The message spoke of a weapon, one capable of stopping the ancient enemy. And that weapon was now with him. But it wasn't as simple as that. The message also told him something else. Jackson wasn't just a warrior chosen by the armor. He was the key to the galaxy's survival, or its doom. The armor had chosen him because of a secret hidden within him, a secret that even the ancients had never fully understood. He wasn't just a human. He was the last descendant of the ancients themselves, their bloodline hidden for centuries, long forgotten by all. The armor had recognized this, and it had chosen him to wield its power in the final war against the returning enemy. Jackson had no idea what this meant for him, for humanity, or for the galaxy, but one thing was clear. He could no longer run. The battle was coming, and whether he was ready or not, the universe would force him to face it. Suddenly, the calm inside him shattered. A new voice echoed through his mind, harsh and cold, unlike the armor's soothing presence. It wasn't a voice from the armor, it was a voice from the enemy. The message was short, but its meaning was clear. We know you have the armor. You will die before you can wield its power. Jackson didn't hesitate. The enemy had found him already. He had barely survived the first attack, and now the real threat was here. The quiet whispers of distant space were gone, replaced by the roar of an enemy force, so ancient and powerful that even the ancients had feared them. The voice continued, growing stronger, more intense, filling his mind with images of ships, weapons, and soldiers, all bent on one purpose: to destroy him and the armor. The message was not just a threat. It was a warning. They were coming. A bright flash lit the sky, and Jackson's eyes snapped to the horizon. A fleet of ships, unlike anything he had seen before, appeared on the edge of space. They were massive, their hulls made of dark, metallic material that shimmered unnaturally in the light of distant stars. Their engines pulsed with an eerie green glow, and as they moved closer, the air around Jackson seemed to grow heavier, the very fabric of space warping under their presence. He could feel it, the pressure building, the weight of the approaching doom. The ships didn't come alone. They were followed by a presence, an invisible force that seemed to fill the entire area, pressing against Jackson's mind. It was as though the very air was alive, watching him, waiting for him to make the first move. The armor hummed in response, shifting and adapting to the new threat. It had already begun to unlock more of its power, not just protecting Jackson, but enhancing his senses, sharpening his focus, and allowing him to perceive the true danger that loomed over him. Jackson gripped the control panel, his heart pounding in his chest. The enemy was here, and they were not going to make the same mistake twice. He could see the enormous ships now, their weapons charging, ready to fire. His instincts kicked in, and without thinking, he activated the ship's systems. The armor responded instantly, cloaking the ship in an impenetrable field, blocking the first wave of fire from the enemy fleet. But it wasn't enough. The enemy ships continued to advance, their weapons shifting to more powerful modes, each shot causing the ship to shudder under the force of the blasts. Jackson knew he couldn't keep dodging them forever. He needed to take the fight to them. The armor had given him the power, but he had no idea how to control it, how to tap into its true potential. The force inside him was growing, but it was chaotic, uncontrollable. Then the armor spoke to him again, more urgently this time, pushing him to focus, to tap into something deeper. The key was not just in the armor, it was in his blood. The armor had recognized something inside him, a connection to the ancients that no one had known existed. This was his destiny. This was why he had been chosen. With a deep breath, Jackson focused, letting the power of the armor flood through him. He felt it then, something that hadn't been there before, a connection to the very fabric of the universe. He could see the ships now, their movements, their weaknesses. He knew how to strike, how to outmaneuver them. The armor flowed through him like a second skin, a living, breathing force that understood the battlefield as if it had been born from it. He raised his hand, and with a single thought, the ship moved, twisting and weaving through the air like a living thing. The weapons fired, but they missed, as though they were guided by the same invisible hand that now guided him. Jackson's ship launched forward, faster than the enemy could react, and in one clean strike, he tore through the first ship, sending it into a spiral of destruction. The others scattered, but they were too late. The armor had awoken something inside him, and now the battle was his to win. But even as the enemy ships fell, Jackson knew this was just the beginning. The true battle, the one that would decide the fate of the galaxy, had only just begun, and the darkness that had stirred centuries ago was still watching, waiting, and this time, it would not be so easily defeated. The battle was far from over. Jackson had thought for a moment that the destruction of the first alien ship might signal a victory, but he quickly realized that the situation was much more dire than he had first imagined. The armor, though powerful, was only a tool. It was still up to him to make the right choices, to understand what was happening, and to navigate the overwhelming threat now bearing down on Earth. The enemy was no longer just a distant fleet. They had begun to move with terrifying precision, closing in on Jackson's ship from all sides, tightening their grip like a noose around a trapped animal. He could feel the pressure building. The air inside the cockpit felt thick, the tension almost unbearable, but Jackson remained calm. The armor was alive with energy, guiding his thoughts, feeding him information faster than he could process. There was no escape from the attack. Even with the cloak of invisibility, the enemy ships had adapted. They were closing in, their weapons locking on. Jackson's ship was fast, but they were faster. He knew that the only way to survive was to fight back. The enemy might have underestimated Earth once, but they would not make that mistake again. And neither would he. The armor hummed with an ancient energy, and Jackson could feel it awakening deeper within him. The power surged through his veins like a current, as if the armor had become a part of him. He understood then that this was what it had meant all along. He wasn't just wearing the armor. He was becoming the armor. And together, they would stand against this impossible threat. His mind sharpened, and his awareness expanded. He could see the enemy ship's movements in his mind's eye, each ship's weak points, the way they interacted with one another. The tactics that had once been beyond his understanding were now clear. It wasn't just a battle of firepower. It was a battle of strategy, of intelligence, of who could outthink the other. With a deep breath, Jackson slammed his hands down on the controls, the ship jolting forward with incredible speed. The enemy fleet responded instantly, their weapons glowing with destructive intent. But Jackson had already anticipated their movements. With a flick of his wrist, he turned the ship at an impossible angle, dodging the barrage of fire that followed, narrowly missing the deadly beams. The enemy ships fired again, and again Jackson was ahead of them, twisting through the air like a predator evading its prey. But there were more enemies, so many more than he had first realized. Jackson's eyes scanned the field, and he saw them now, a secondary fleet emerging from the depths of space. Massive warships appearing like shadows in the void, moving with the precision of a deadly storm. They were here, and they had come for him. "Activate the countermeasures," Jackson ordered, his voice steady but urgent. The ship's systems responded instantly, launching a flurry of energy pulses into the space around him, distorting the weapon's aim, disrupting their lock-ons. It wasn't enough to stop them completely, but it bought him precious time. Time he couldn't afford to waste. Jackson knew the battle wasn't just about surviving. It was about winning. He had been chosen to wield the armor, but that didn't mean the war would be handed to him. The armor had given him the power, but he had to learn how to control it, how to use it to its fullest extent. And that meant understanding his enemy, the mysterious force that had come to destroy him. The next move had to be decisive. He couldn't keep dodging and weaving forever. The alien fleet would eventually adapt, and when they did, it would be too late. Jackson needed to strike first, to hit them before they could lock in on him. But how? That's when it clicked. The armor's energy wasn't just about raw power, it was about manipulation. He could manipulate the field around him, alter the space itself, shifting it to his advantage. He could use the very fabric of space to trap the enemy, to catch them in their own weapons, to turn their own strength against them. Jackson grinned, the thrill of the strategy fueling him. He had been using the armor as a weapon, but now he would use it as a shield and a trap. With a single thought, Jackson expanded the energy field around his ship, distorting the fabric of space. The enemy ships fired again, their weapons locking onto the field, but as they did, Jackson shifted it, redirecting their fire back at them. The first ship exploded in a burst of flame, its core imploding as the energy it had released bounced back upon it. The remaining ships hesitated, thrown off by the unexpected turn of events. Jackson seized the moment. With quick precision, he engaged his engines, slamming the ship into the heart of the enemy formation, dodging blasts as he moved through the chaos. The armor responded, enhancing his senses, allowing him to predict the movement of each ship, the trajectory of each blast. One by one, the enemy ships fell, torn apart by their own fire, destroyed by the trap Jackson had set in motion. But just as the last of the alien ships disintegrated in the distance, a voice filled his mind. A voice older, colder, more terrifying than anything he had heard before. You think this is over, human? This is just the beginning. The true enemy has not yet shown its face, and you will die knowing that you've only unleashed the darkness. Jackson's heart skipped a beat as the message echoed in his mind. The voice was not the enemy fleets. No, this was something far worse. Something ancient. He had only fought the first wave. The true threat, the one that had been lurking in the shadows, had not yet revealed itself. The armor hummed again, but this time it felt different, as though it was vibrating with an unknown fear. Jackson's blood ran cold. The enemy had just revealed the smallest sliver of the truth. The galaxy was in danger, and this battle was only the beginning. But Jackson wasn't going to back down. Not now. He had the armor, and with it, he would face whatever came next. The war had begun, and he was ready for it.